Hi, and welcome to 60 for 30. I'm Sam, and today we're going to be doing something a little different, a little bit of a thought experiment with some fun math. So welcome to my TED Talk on whether or not paying money for magic cards is actually worth it. So what I'm not talking about magic cards in general. I'm talking about the expense of magic cards. We spend our time here at 60 for 30 thinking about playing on a budget, but there is this allure of paying a ton of money for the expensive cards to make your deck super good. So, a personal anecdote, I had been playing blue-white spirits in Modern at my local game store. I had the Aether Vials, I had all the spirits, but I couldn't make the transition to playing Dance Spirits because I didn't have Noble Hierarchs, and I told myself I can't just play Birds of Paradise. That's People are just going to make fun of me, right? You need the full deck, you need the Noble Hierarchs. So this past Christmas, they'd just been reprinted in Ultimate Masters, and I bit the bullet and I bought Noble Hierarchs. But then I started asking myself, what did I buy for all that money? What did I get? So let's look at that. What actually is the difference between a Noble Hierarch and a Birds of Paradise? And so, on one hand, very simply, $136 is the price difference in a playset of Birds of Paradise versus Noble Hierarch. So what are you getting for that $136? Well, quite frankly, every relevant thing is exactly the same, except one has exalted and one has flying. So the question really becomes, is the difference between flying and exalted worth $136? So keep in mind that flying, it's not like one has exalted and one has nothing. There is actually a benefit to the Birds of Paradise that the Noble Hierarch doesn't have, which is being able to block a flying creature, which isn't irrelevant in a metagame right now where Phoenix decks are extremely popular. But Exalted is very strong. It lets you chip in extra damage, so if you swing with a guy who was going to be a 1/1 flyer, he's a 2/2 flyer, could be a 3/3 if you have two nobles. And I think an underrated aspect of the Exalted triggers is that it's not like your attacks just do +1 damage. Sometimes they allow you to attack when otherwise you wouldn't be able to attack at all. So say you had a 2/2 flyer and they had a 2/2 flying blocker, you attack with a 3/3 flyer because of Exalted, so you're getting an extra 3 damage that you wouldn't have chosen to swing in with if you just had your 2/2 and it wasn't getting pumped by the Exalted. So that's +3 damage in that case. And then there's like the fringe case of getting through an ensnaring bridge because your Hierarch can attack and buff itself. So bear with me here because this is where we're going to do some guesswork. I promise this is the only shoddy guesswork in this video. The rest of the math is very solid. Hey, I took a stats class in high school, so I got to know what I'm talking about, right? But here, we're going to guesstimate, because that's all we can do, that playing Noble Hierarchs will win you the game 10% of the time more when you see them in place of the Birds of Paradise. Okay, that's our one assumption, that Noble Hierarch is +10 to your win percent, like +10 wins in games that you see a Noble Hierarch, +10%. Okay, I actually think that's quite generous because how often is that exalted trigger really the key difference? I'm willing to say 10% of the time it wins you a game that you otherwise would have lost. Okay, so with that assumption, let's see what the fruits of our labor are. So it's extremely important to then figure out how often you're going to see Noble Hierarch to get that 10%, right? So this is a graphic from Channel Fireball. Got to give them credit for this. We're going to be playing 4 copies. In Modern, you can probably expect the game to go about 4 or 5 turns. So somewhere you're going to see a Noble Hierarch, at least one, somewhere between 53 and 57% of the time. So we're going to just round that to 55%. And if we see it, so 55% of the time we're going to see the card, at least one copy, and 10% of the time it's going to win us a game that we otherwise would have lost. So that is going to be, in just total games played, plus 5.5% to our win percentage. So in 100 games, if we would win 50 of them, that's another assumption. Sorry, I lied about making one assumption. There are 2 assumptions. Let's assume the base case, your Bant Spirit deck with Birds of Paradise wins 50% of the time. Perfectly balanced, right? That means in 100 games we would win 50. Now, with our plus 5.5%, we're going to be winning 52.75 games out of 100 instead of 50. So our win percentage goes from 50-50 to 52.75 wins, and 47.25% of the times we're going to lose. So with that in mind, what does that mean? Well, we just talked about our game win percentage. It actually goes up in a best of 3 match that you would play in any competitive setting, because you're playing 2 or 3 games, so the win percentage is going to increase. So the deck with nobles is going to win 4.22% more of the time than the one with just birds. But what does that mean, right? So if we put it in the context of going to your local game store, mine does their events on Mondays. It's 4 rounds. This is what your expected performance would be with the win percentage, the match win percentage of the nobles versus the birds. And you'll see that, yeah, you're going to win more games running the nobles, right? But how many more, right? It's how significant is this effect that you're paying $136 for? Quite simply, if you count, going back to this slide here, if you count going 4-0 or 3-1 as a good night, then buying the nobles is going to give you a good night almost 38% of the time, whereas playing with the birds, you'll have a good night about 31% of the time. So that's not insignificant. But what does that mean? Well, assuming that you go to the store every week for a year, but you skip some weeks, there's a holiday or you're out of town for a weekend and you don't feel like it Monday. So let's say 40 visits in a year. With those win percentages that we talked about, you're going to have 12 and a half good nights where you finish 4-0 or 3-1 running your birds, and you're going to have 15.17 good nights a year with your nobles, assuming 40 nights a year that you're playing, which I think is probably about right based on my experience. I try and go as much as I can, but just things pop up from time to time. So let's talk about that. So the difference between 15.17 and 12.5 good nights is 2.67. So by playing Noble Hierarchs in a year, going 40 times to your local game store to play in a 4-round modern event, you can expect to win an extra 2.67 times, have a good night an extra 2.67 times per year. And we paid $136. So for that first year, you were paying $51 for each bonus good night that you have. $51 for each good night that otherwise would have been a 2-2 night or a 1-3 night. $51. It's pretty startling. But let's say you're not about the performance, you're about the money, right? Because at my game store, you win money based on your performance. So my game store has a $5 buy-in for modern, and then if you finish 3-1, you get $10 in store credit. And if you finish 4-0, you get whatever's left of the buy-in pot after all the 3-1s are paid out, which usually works out to be about $30. So the expected value of not going 3-1 or better is negative $5 per night. And if you go 3-1, that's plus 5, right? Because you pay 5, you get 10, you end up plus 5 on the night. And you'd be plus 25 if you go 4-0. Okay? So you have for the Birds of Paradise, you have a 67% chance of losing $5. With the Nobles, you only have a 62% chance of losing $5. So the expected value breaks down like this. If you play birds in the price structure that I just talked about, every time you go, you're going to be losing about 63 cents. If you play the nobles, every time you win, you're going to be winning every time you go, you're going to be winning 51 cents just based on the expected value over time. Okay? Which comes out to a difference of $1.14 per night that you play the nobles over the birds. Which is not insignificant, right? You're making money, but let's keep in mind you paid $136 for those Noble Hierarchs. So at an extra $1.14 per night, it would take you 120 visits to your store to make that money back, which is a lot. We talked about you can probably expect to go if they have an event once a week, go 40 times a year. So we're talking about it's 3 years before you make back your investment in the Noble Hierarchs, assuming that you get to play 40 times a week. You don't get sick, or your game store shuts down, or you move and you don't have a game store, or the people that you like going there to play with stop going, so you stop going. Assuming you go 40 times a year, it'll take you 3 years to break even from an investment in Noble Hierarchs. And that's just something to think about when we talk about budget decks. I love playing on a budget. I have several budget modern decks. I obviously run a YouTube channel about budget decks, mostly in modern, because it's such an expensive format. And people, there's this attitude in the community that I myself am subject to. I participate in it where it's like, well, if you're not going to play the optimized version of a deck, why are you even here, right? Like, why are you going to play Bant Spirits without the Nobles or without the Cavern of Souls, right? And it's like, how much does that really matter? How much does that hurt you versus just playing like, I don't know, mana confluence, right? That helps your mana in the same way, but hurts you a little bit and allows your spells to be countered. What's the actual difference? And it turns out it's so small. The margins here, even assuming that the Noble Hierarch wins 10% of games that you would lose that you see it, which again I think is generous. We saw, you know, you're only expected to win 2.67 more nights a year that you go. It's not an insignificant difference, but it's really small. You can go and expect to do almost as well playing your Birds of Paradise over your Noble Hierarch. So I made this video to just point out that you don't have to buy in literally to the elitism of, well, you have to play the $900 version of this deck or you're wasting your time. You can play the $120 version of that deck, and yeah, you'll lose more, but is it is it worth it to you? What kind of Magic player are you? If you're a professional, like, disregard this video, because every percentage point that you can squeeze out of your deck is valuable. But if you're going to Magic Night at your store once a week to play around with some of your local friends or some of your people, and you're playing it for like $5 in store credit, it's how worth is it? You know, it's so expensive, really, and I don't think in a lot of cases that it's really worth it. So thanks for watching the video. I'm Sam with 60 for 30. Comments, tell me your story, what you spent way too much money on. Like I said, I bought the Noble Hierarchs, and after making this video, I'm not sure I made the right call. But also, I'm not trying to shame anybody. I did it, and I think that I'll play Bant Spirits for a very long time, or other decks that use Noble Hierarchs as a modern staple. So I don't necessarily have buyer's remorse, but think about it carefully before you buy. All right, that's all I'm saying. Thanks for watching. Have fun out there. That's what it's all about.